Psychology.
Hello again. So we are back. We're still looking at the Core Studies exam. We're still looking at section B, and this time we've got a bit more of a focus on the debates side of it. As we've already discussed, there are 35 marks in this section. There'll be a range of questions, some quite short, some a bit longer. You could be asked to outline a debate. You could be asked to link a study to a debate, say how it contributes to a debate. You could be asked to discuss a debate, and in today's video we are going to arm ourselves to be able to do all of those things and more. What do we need to do to prepare ourselves for this then? Well, according to the specification, we should be able to define principles and concepts within each debate and the different positions within the debate, which means that we describe the two sides of the debate and then hopefully be able to contextualise our descriptions of each side of the debate with something that happened in a course study. Also, we have to describe applications of different positions within the debate and how each debate is similar and different from the debates, which we will be doing shortly. Right, I think you're more than capable of describing both sides of most debates already, but I want to take a moment to look at the ones that can be a little bit less clear. Nature-nurture, the two sides of it are obvious. Free will determinism, the two sides of it are obvious. On this list, 4 of them have two sides written out. But when it comes to usefulness of research, what are the two sides of the debate? And I guess that's very similar to the work we did in section A, that most research has a practical application, which is useful. However, if that has been undermined by a limitation of the study, so we can't trust it, then perhaps it doesn't have usefulness that we can actually take away. Ethical considerations. The debate there is, can we actually do ethical research? Should we do ethical research? If we do ethical research, then that's great because it means that we have protected our participants and met our duty of care to look after them and protected the reputation of the subject, which means that it doesn't become a kind of like game show. Like lots of people might think, oh, psychology, yeah, that's where you get people to give each other electric shocks, which isn't really great in terms of how it's respected and trusted. On the other hand, if we do totally ethical research, there are massive demand characteristics, massive experimental effects. We don't really have much in the way of validity of what we've learned, and we can't really take any findings at their value. So we have to balance between our responsibility to be ethical and our responsibility to develop scientific understanding. Why is socially sensitive research a debate? Well, I mean, quite simply, if we do something that makes people feel uncomfortable or provide information that could be used to prejudice against a group of people or discriminate against a group of people, that's bad. On the other hand, by doing those things, we may be able to guard against it, further our understanding and prevent those things happening in the future. And finally, psychology as a science. Well, the debate there is quite simple. Should it be scientific? We have cause and effect, we have academic rigour, we have quantitative data, but we lose ecological validity, we lose the ability to find out about people outside of the lab, we lose a holistic approach which helps us to understand the multiple factors that influence all our behaviours, and in do so we are less successful in terms of explaining ourselves. So there is a debate there to be had. Now, before we get on to your actual task, I want to walk through with you some applications of different sides of the debate, because they're not always obvious, and I think it would help us to do that together. So arm yourselves with pen and pencil, paper and pencil, a computer if you can, and then get back here and I'll tell you what I think. Applications can be practical uses, and in certain of the debates they're straightforward. In the nature-nurture debate, you might consider nature effectively to mean biological psychology. So any practical application from biological psychology, such as brain mapping and our ability to use that to help us do brain surgery, would be usefulness. Likewise, nurture could be said to be behaviorism, so changing behaviour with conditioning could be very helpful. Practical applications of free will is quite difficult because free will is the enemy of psychology. If there are no causes of behaviour, and psychology is the search for causes of behaviour, then the whole subject disappears in a puff of smoke. However, we can consider, first of all, that not everybody in every study does the same things. If you look at social psychology and the binary choices people get with something like Bocchiario and whistleblowing or not whistleblowing, 8% of people did whistleblow, so therefore they exercised free will that the others didn't, showing that not everybody has to obey those rules, which can encourage us to find ways to prevent people being trapped by particular social situations. And that is good because it can protect us from nasty situations developing. Furthermore, by having an understanding that free will can exist, it has moral and legal applications as well as treatments. If there is free will, people can believe that they change. If they are victims to their cognitions and the belief that the world is a bad place, then if they have free will, they have the ability to face up to and change and challenge those cognitions, and so change their experience and their behaviour. Determinism is any rule that says that this will determine behaviour. So most of psychology is to some extent deterministic. So any study that says this causes this to happen is deterministic, and any application that comes out of that study, for instance, if we put rewards on an inhaling device, it encourages people to adhere to their medical responsibilities. That is an application, and so we've met the criteria there. Reductionism, we can say pretty much the same as determinism. If something's reductionist, you can look at an independent variable, how it affects a dependent variable. We can see cause and effect. We can take an application of any study that does that, as just described, and we've got a useful application. Holism is a bit trickier again because not much psychology is truly holistic, but some is more holistic than others. If you look at Freud, he gathered an enormous amount of data about little Hans's dreams and fantasies and experience and what he said and the horses he saw and bath time, etc. So that gives us a more holistic, rounded, whole approach to understanding him, which you could argue is a more valid approach than something reductionist, and so therefore that has led to treatments and it's led to a richer understanding. In a more simple way, any studies that have multiple variables can help us understand the who and why better than anything as a single variable. Bandura considered both the model and the gender of the observer, and we understood the extent to which those two interplayed and gave us a greater understanding of who was more likely to be aggressive and when they were more likely to be aggressive. I hope individual versus situational explanations of behaviours is also fairly straightforward. If you have an individual explanation of behaviour, it's something within the person, i.e. the structure of their brain, their biology, or their individual cognitions and thought processes. And so you can look at Loftus's work on the influence on memory and the thought processes that are involved in reconstruction of memory and how we have applications of that. So that's quite straightforward. Situational, well, look at your social psychologists. Influence on helping behaviour is something we'll look at. From your point of view, you've done about obedience, and we know the conditions in which obedience become more great, and so we can make sure people know that they have personal responsibility for their actions, and so hopefully abuse of power is less likely to happen. Usefulness, well, the two sides of the debate are that psychology is useful, i.e. it has applications, or that it isn't useful because of limitations of research, which means that those applications can't really be trusted in the real world. So there you have that. Socially sensitive research can be useful in that it allows us to find ways to help improve situations that are potentially socially sensitive. If you look at Freud's work, we find it uncomfortable to think about infant sexuality. However, coming out of it has been psychotherapy, and of course the awareness of the importance of childhood on becoming a balanced adult, which has led to the Child Act and protection of children, etc., suggesting that while we may not want to look at those things, if we deal with them correctly, we can make life better. Now, I know if you're in year 12, you've only got your 10 studies so far, but if we were to develop that further with the applications, we look at attachment in children. That's a socially sensitive issue because it might suggest that children have less good attachment, and there's been a tendency there to blame mothers for lack of strength of attachment. But taking that on, we've also seen that the temperament of the child has an influence on the attachment, and we've found ways to help improve attachment, for instance, skin-to-skin contact shortly after birth. So while it is a sensitive issue, it's also helped to improve a sensitive issue. And the final point is that applications, as well as usefulness, can also be involving in legal or moral judgments and decisions about blame and treatment and change. Let's go back to the nature-nurture debate. If we can conclude that something is nature, i.e. you're born with it, then what personal responsibility do you have with it? And when we look at Rain's study on murderers' brains, we'll see that he also has been in court defending somebody that has committed a pretty appalling murder, not to say that he wasn't guilty, but to say that he had less free will to do it because of the nature of his brains and the nature of his genes and the nature of his social upbringing, meaning that while he was responsible for his actions, that contributed to that murderer not getting a death sentence because of his lesser responsibility. So that's another slant we can put at it in terms of applying those debates to society in general. Okie dokie, now it's time for your job, and your job is to complete the second Gert Big table that I've uploaded onto Teams for you. You can see what needs to be done on the visual in front of you, but I'm not going to ask you to do it all. I am going to ask you to do all of the first 4 columns. Those columns are describing the one side of a debate and give an example where it can be seen from a study, and the other side of a debate giving an example where it can be seen from a study. What we've already talked about should be quite helpful to you there. So I'm going to ask you to pause that video and spend a good wad of time doing that. But the 5th column, the example of a study which provides both sides of a debate, is a bit trickier, particularly given that we're only halfway through the course. So once you've done your work, come back to me and I'll go through some studies that I think represent a bit of one and a bit of another. So I'll leave you there going through those first 4 columns, and we'll go through the 5th column and indeed all the remaining columns in the second half of this video. Have fun. Bye for now.